to get into this, to bring these to life a bit more. And so when we get rolling, and we'll get into it. I guess we'll get questions at the end. Okay, so I'm going to share these principles. Hopefully bring them to life with some interesting case examples that make them more relevant. Some of the cases are expressed here. I'm just going to talk about other ones that come to mind that I think are relevant to this situation. And then at the end, we'll do a Q&A and so forth. I think you gave a bit of background on Linkwell Health, so I won't spend more time on this. I'll get right into the principles. But I mentioned there's lots of people that were involved in creating this, and I just want to reference this. And I think, frankly, it maybe reinforces a core principle for me, which I've learned. I didn't really appreciate this earlier in my career, but later on certainly, is that you need help, regardless of your experience and how successful you've been and so forth. Getting help, asking for help, raising your hand and say, I'm not sure, or I think I have a solution or an answer, but I'd like to get some perspective from others, is obviously a really, really important thing. So the success principles we'll lay out today are much better from these folks. Chris Hessler and I created this consumer marketing advisory board for some of the work at Linkwell in November, December, and January. And I can't tell you how valuable it's been. You have, oops, sorry. Okay, here we go. You know, people like John Costello, who, you know, CMO at Yahoo in the glory days, not the more recent period, CMO of Dunkin' Brands. You know, Dunkin' we'll talk a bit about today is really a remarkable brand, particularly from the East Coast, and understand Dunkin' Donuts and the obsession that people have with that business. Karen Francis lives in the San Francisco area, but was the highest ranking female executive in Detroit for both General Motors and Ford at one period, and is really a professional board member. She's really excellent in terms of applying her learnings to other company situations. She's been invaluable to this. Ty Shea is, I hired Ty as a manager at Hotwire years ago. He's now the chief marketing officer at LifeLock, and I take a lot of pride in Ty because Ty was one of those people that just so smart, but great learner. And we did some, I think, really neat things at Hotwire to grow that business over time. And one of the core messages and the core principles we had was trial and error. We don't have all the answers. Let's do things and let's learn about them and iterate and learn from our mistakes. Good news and bad news need to travel fast, and you can really do great things. Ty has taken a lot of these principles and done amazing things at LifeLock, which we'll talk about today. And we get some really good perspective from Jeffrey Raport from Harvard Business School, who's a more practical guy. This is the guy who's coined the term viral marketing. And so a lot of perspective and different insights and experiences have come into the presentation today. Okay, so world-class consumer brands, they have something in common. I think it's already popped up on the screen, so I can't ask you, what is it? But, you know, you can say customers and, you know, great products and so forth, but, you know, ultimately all great brands and great businesses have raving fans. And I don't mean to be flippant or lighthearted in this. When I say raving fans, I mean, it really makes a difference. We're talking about passionate people who will talk about the service or experience. So you can think of many of them. I'm thinking about, you know, Uber or Lyft a couple of years ago, or how people talk about SoulCycle. You know, we all have our favorite brands, businesses, services, and this isn't just a consumer brand phenomenon. So I know in the Alpine Investors portfolio, there's lots of service businesses, a lot of business to business services, and so forth. I think these principles really much apply to that as well. So a raving fan could be millions of consumers, or it could be dozens of business consumers. So how do you create these raving fans? And, you know, we think that there's, you know, a number of core principles. And I want to say up front that, you know, I mentioned that this will not be some kind of secret sauce or magic. You know, here are the tablets delivered from on high. This is the answer. These are good principles, but we could probably poll the room or poll the folks who are on the phone or out in TV land and ask them about principles, and we'd probably get a different list. In fact, I'm certain we would. These are, you know, 8 principles that I think are very, very valuable. We'll get into. But one of the things I want to do is I know that the learning culture at Alpine Investors is essential. So I would like to impart some principles, but at the end, I'm really hoping we get some input and some disagreement. Like, I'm not so sure about that one. Or how about this one? Or in my experience, I felt that this principle is really important. So I'm very open to that. And one of my goals in speaking today, I don't think we'll have a whiteboard session afterwards, but perhaps after there'll be input. Hey, John's made some interesting points, but I'd like to suggest this principle as well, or here's another example. That would be very valuable. I'd like to, improve this presentation as we go on. So please share your thoughts. But what we're going to talk about is, maniacal dedication to your target audience. So you really need to know your target. We're going to talk about that. Focusing on the fundamentals, having a differentiated brand positioning is critically important. Some people call it a brand equity, brand strategy, but really a clearly, tightly defined brand positioning statement is critical to any successful consumer brand. Product, we're going to talk a lot about this, but a lot of time you think about marketing, flash, and so forth, but ultimately the product is so critical. Community. This is essential. I think this room gets it. In fact, I think we're here because of Alpine's investors' dedication to community and the shared learning opportunities that exist, right, among yourselves. It was actually really interesting to me that different portfolio company folks come in and you guys know each other, and that's really cool. You know each other by a first name, and that suggests that there's lots of shared interests and learning already happening. So I don't think I need to spend lots of time on this principle. Integrated brand experience, really surrounding your consumer or customer, is critically important. We'll talk a little bit about digital mobile first. And I will say this one was a new learning for me. So if I'd given this presentation 10 years ago, I would have laid out principles of marketing success or building consumer brands. I would have missed on this one. We did a lot of great work at Hotwire, but things are evolving so quickly. And there's so much you can do with digital mobile. And so my point is, it's not an add-on strategy or principle. It really needs to be the focus of any solid business plan today. Measurement. I think this one is intuitive to a lot of people. We're going to talk about how putting measurements in practice. And then we're all about our people, so we'll get into that as well. Okay. Number one, it's this maniacal obsession with your consumer. And the case study I could talk about is Procter & Gamble. So I spent 12 years at P&G, and Procter & Gamble is very famous for their really intense market research function. But ultimately, it's more of a culture. It's a value that the company holds. That a CEO of Procter & Gamble famously said about 25 years ago, look, you could take away all of our brands, all of our physical assets, but leave us our people and our dedication to consumer understanding. We could rebuild the whole thing in 10 years. And that's a pretty provocative statement, but it really reinforces the company's dedication to consumer understanding. And there's lots of quantitative studies that P&G does, lots of qualitative work, focus group. P&G is not into focus groups as much, but really engaging with consumers one-on-one in home. So supporting the quantitative work that you do, but also deep dive psychological studies, very, very important. So really, again, this will be an example that you're all probably saying, yeah, I understand consumer understanding, or understanding our market, understanding our customer base. That's obvious. So nothing new. But I guess what I want to really, really enforce is how critically important it is when you're starting a business, but also you may find yourself at year 8 or year 12 saying, okay, how do we re-energize this thing? How do we jumpstart growth? And really focusing on this fundamental of going back to your core consumer target, competitive brand, competitive business customers, and mining those insights is so, so important. Yep. Just ask it and I'll try and repeat it, Graham. Yeah.
Okay. The question is, can you give us some actual tools? Because you see quantitative study and psychological studies. That sounds great.
Right.
So how do we do that? Where do we go to find those things? Or is that coming up, or can you maybe just?
No, it's not. It's not coming up, but we can hit on that.
Make it like more tactical. What do we actually do?
Sure, because it's easy to say, oh, Procter & Gamble, and you say, okay, we don't have the market research budget of Procter & Gamble. Okay, so the question was, let me repeat it, was, hey, John, could you give some examples of some specific tools or things that you've done to bring this to life that might be more applicable to, Alpine Investors companies? So I actually have a couple. I'm going to talk about personal experiences. So applying this principle in a startup world. So Hotwire. So Hotwire is an online travel company. And when we started that thing, it didn't have a name. I'm going to go back to year 2000. And we did not have the budget to do massive quantitative studies of the travel industry. So we got very scrappy. So from a quantitative standpoint, we borrowed. So we basically built relationships with analysts in the travel space, begged, borrowed, and got their quantitative research reports, built relationships to get lots of quantitative evidence on that information. We were an early user of SurveyMonkey to do quasi quantitative studies by just literally using SurveyMonkey, creating a tool and getting out there. I would say the statistical precision, having PhDs involved to define your quantitative study isn't important. It's more of getting out there and getting insights and data, so using the tools. The online tools that exist today to do quantitative research are certainly extensive. It's more taking the action. And this is the thing that I think hopefully is very applicable. So we were trying to figure out how to beat Priceline at the time. This was when Jay Walker was claiming that Priceline would solve everything and so forth. And we were a startup. And we spent time at airports. This is pre 9/11, so you could actually just go through security and talk to people. And so my marketing team thought that I was a little crazy, but I said, let's go to the airports. And so we sat and we did consumer intercepts of people coming off the plane to talk to them. They weren't always really thrilled to talk to us, but 1 in 5, they would sit down and talk to you. And we talked to, SFO people. And this is when Southwest was only in Oakland. So we spent lots of time in Oakland Airport talking to Southwest customers. Why are they happy? Why do you fly Southwest? Because we determined our target would be the discount airline traveler. So just it was not really structured. We had 10 questions we had in mind. Then you get someone who would go off on a tangent. And the point is zero budget, but an investment in time and going to talk to your potential target consumers. The example I'd use for pets.com, what would be, we went to dog parks, and years ago, this pets.com sock puppet was kind of this crazy, silly thing, but believe it or not, there was actually a fair amount of research and consumer interaction that went into the insights. And so I guess what I'd offer, Graham, I was going to bring this point up anyway, is that you don't have to have big budgets or Procter & Gamble's market research staff to do this. You just need to get out.
Give one example of like what you learned in your report to change how you marketed customers, or so you did that study and then.
Right. So the insight that really came up is that we really sharpened our target, and we said, sorry, let me repeat the question so you can hear it. You said, give an example of from the intercept with, say, Southwest that actually was actionable for us and how it changed our thinking. Thank you. Julie, you're gonna have to keep reminding me of that. We sharpened our target audience. So in talking to the Southwest consumer, we said we really are going after this hardcore bargain consumer, right? And literally the insight was that these consumers could afford to travel, maybe take one vacation a year, maybe it's family to Thanksgiving trip. But with Hotwire, they could actually afford to take 2. So that was one insight. And so really sharpening the target audience. And then also just understanding the level of frustration that consumers had with the flying experience. So we knew that as people who flew, that flying isn't always a great experience, but the anger and the frustration of people flying, United or Delta, and even sometimes Southwest, was pretty extreme. So really that led to a customer service commitment we had at Hotwire, which was, we're going to have Nordstrom-like customer service. So we don't need to treat people badly because they are discount bargain hunters. We're going to treat them really well. And that turned out to be a massive differentiator versus Priceline. So, yeah. So my point is get out there and just engage your customer, your potential consumer. Positioning. This slide and positioning statements in general are very boring, and it's purposeful. So so advertising and marketing messages, of course, should engage and inspire the consumer to act. A really well curated post on Facebook should be engaging, really designed to get people to act. But all of these various activities you might do in marketing, whether it's B2B or B2C, need to be driven by a really clear focus on your brand. What is your business? What does your brand stand for? And again, this is one of those things that you all know this, but this is frequently forgotten. So I remember being in a startup after years and years of Procter & Gamble, and there's this discipline and rigor and all these checks about making sure your positioning is right. And suddenly you're a startup and like, woo, no rules. Well, the rules apply. And you have to, I would just encourage everyone to say, hey, my business, is the brand positioning as clear, crisp, and as articulate as it could be? Is it really differentiated? And just as a reminder for everybody, look, a classic positioning statement, I always encourage people to go back to the basics. It really defines one's target audience, demographically, ideally, psychographically. It defines your unique benefit statement, your reason, why do you exist? What makes you special versus another brand? And then tangible proof points. And I would say this seems simple, and oh, no problem, no problem. But I challenge you to really think about your brand and, what is your brand benefit? Can you do that today? Your business benefit, is it clear to you? Is it indelible? There's a great book by Trout and Reese called Positioning. It talks about waking up a consumer in the middle of the night and saying, brand X, what would they say? When they're just, wildly just awoken. And so is your brand positioning clear and indelible? Pantene is a brand I spent a lot of time on, and everyone's seen Pantene advertising. And the positioning statement is boring, but it was actually very choiceful and actually critically helpful to make sure this brand would be successful. So it defines the target audience, females 18 to 49 who possess damaged hair. It defines a clear benefit statement, hair so healthy it shines, which now is not so unique, but in the day talking about healthy hair back in 1991 through 2005 was pretty unique. Hair's dead, how can it be healthy? And bringing that to life. And this whole idea of provitamin B5, this vitamin thing, again, doesn't really seem that unique today, but in the time it was very, very differentiated. So the message is not that you should go off and do the Pantene positioning statement, is make sure that your brand, your business, your reason for being is really tightly defined. And there's lots of work we could do to talk about target audience, demographics, consumer segmentation, psychographics. There's lots of simple tools that exist. You don't need, used to be $250,000 and a big team of PhDs to do a segmentation study. That's not needed today. But there's lots of work that one can do to really help improve your ability to be successful around positioning. So who remembers the iPhone, the original iPhone introduction? And there's this slide is meant to recall Steve Jobs' famous speech about today we have 3 products. And he went on to describe, we have an A, a B, and an M. 3 products. And of course he laughed. It's all one, it's the iPhone. And there's a great video that goes with this. If you haven't seen it, it's worth going to YouTube or Googling Steve Jobs' iPhone launch. It's just watch it, it's fun and really interesting. My point is this: we could talk a lot about research and branding, and I could maybe give another discussion about principles of advertising and customer connection, but none of it matters. All these principles we'll discuss, that doesn't matter unless the product is great. Is your product, is your service awesome? Is it delightful? Do people love it? So this whole notion of creating raving fans, it doesn't happen regardless of how good your marketing is, how good you deliver on these other principles, unless your product is really, really special. It doesn't have to be the iPhone. It doesn't have to be premium priced, but the value proposition and what your product does and deliver your service has to be great. I mean, talk about stating the obvious, but I think a lot of the things I'll be saying today is hopefully you'll walk away saying, I'm not sure if there's tons of new ideas, but I hope you walk away saying, focusing on the fundamentals and challenging the assumptions that exist in your business today is really important. And it's a little scary sometimes because you have momentum. Maybe you're growing, maybe you're flat. It's tough to look at your business and say, is my product or is my service really differentiated? Is it really special? But it's just by asking that question, having candid conversations among colleagues is essential and really, really helpful. Community. Usually this happens organically and very authentically. Some brands just do a great job and they don't necessarily have a big community team. It just happens because the product's phenomenal. They've done a good job differentiating the brand with positioning, and it comes to life. SoulCycle, and there's a number of other examples you could talk about in terms of this space. This space has been really, the whole fitness and exercise space has been really, really interesting. So, some of you may argue that SoulCycle's old news, but it's still very, very successful. And I think that they do something really remarkable in terms of creating community. And the founders were very deliberate, very intentional from the beginning around, creating community. And, it goes without saying that they wanted to make their product special, and a lot of things in this slide that don't exist, that are implied. But they really said, look, I want to get to know our customers personally. And that's, for a business that was meant to scale, initially when they had one location in New York City, that's relatively easy. But their ambition was to really get to know and know their customers, their consumers personally. So they had to actually get people who really were passionate about that at their locations. The whole idea of asserting the fact that they want to create a community, build a network, create friendships among the classes was real, very intentional, and really critical to this. Being really savvy about social media. So we won't talk a lot about social media today. That's another thing we could do in terms of how the world has changed in terms of, really getting authentic inbound communication, earned media communication. But they've done a great job with that. And as they grow and expand, they never really lost sight of that, of their core DNA, their core passion, is that community, our experience. And I was not a SoulCycle consumer, so I signed up, and I had high expectations, but I was kind of surprised. And there are lots of things they do to build community, but I just want to make a simple point on their auto reply HTML emails. So I sign up, and I get this auto reply, welcome to SoulCycle, and this is different. I mean, they I felt very welcomed. I felt welcomed. It felt energetic, and they were giving me information that I actually needed. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little nervous about going to a SoulCycle class. I'm like, I don't know, and well, is it my deal, and I have to do this. So they invited me in. They made me feel welcome. They actually gave me real tips that would kind of help me, and that was cool. I wasn't a raving fan yet, but that was good. So I took a class, and this isn't on here, so I'm just going to tell you about it. So I walked into SoulCycle, and I don't know if any of you guys have been, but it was kind of electric when you walk in, like, hello, how are you? And you kind of walk up, and I'm John, and like, your first time, that's fantastic. And then, hey, Rachel, and they get Rachel. Rachel's our first time consumer concierge. She's going to show you the locker. She's going to show you how it works. Do you want help fitting the bike? And they did it in a way that I didn't feel, freaked out. It was very friendly and very authentic. But they immediately knew that, hey, you're a first timer. Maybe you have some concerns and insecurities. They did a great job. They set me up at the locker. They bring you into the studio. So it's just very curated and very special. And they really bring it to life. I did a follow-up because I didn't do a SoulCycle thing right away. What's the point of this? My point is that how they do some basic thing. Everyone does auto reply emails. Thanks for signing up. They're typically very impersonal. They don't do much to build community. They don't do much to address the insecurities that might exist with the consumer or with the customer. It's really, they understand this, and they do this because they do the first principle really well. They spend lots of time with their customers, learning, asking them questions. What could be better? They also do some pretty remarkable things like SoulCycle. Obviously, the teachers are very fit. They're very good at cycling, spin classes, but they hire actors. These super gregarious, very energized actors that, that's kind of their, I mean, of course, they're also fitness people, but it's really interesting that they've taken this whole point about what we can do to create community and hiring these actors and these really gregarious people. Okay, number 5, surrounding your consumers at each stage. And this is different. I'll talk about Starbucks here. But I think this philosophy, and Howard Schultz said, we aren't a coffee business serving people. We are a people business serving coffee. And I think that philosophy is almost a principle on its own. The whole idea of, people first and consumer or customer centric, an attitude to your business that really plays out. And they've done a great job in terms of surrounding you. And this has gotten better and better over time. So you walk into a Starbucks, and the whole thing is curated, right? I mean, they have, you're now winding through a maze of products that seem relevant. They are very careful on how they select those products, not just to sell, but really to enhance the Starbucks brand itself. They bring in many other brands. You guys may have remembered Izzy Soda Pop, which was a interesting startup. They brought in Izzy early on because it was, more natural soda, really cool packaging. And they brought it in because it really enhanced the Starbucks brand experience. They do a lot. They do a lot with their Wi-Fi, with their couches and so forth. But it's really kind of a complete surrounded Starbucks experience. And we could talk about other brands and how surrounding your consumer is done very, very differently. But it's thinking about the stages of consumer engagement. It's not on this slide. But you think about you have a prospect, you have a first-time visitor, you have a newsletter receiver. There's different things you can do, and think about how do you surround them with that. Their most recent thing, they borrowed, or they I think reacted from the next principle, Dunkin' Donuts, which I'll talk about in a second, which is their digital strategy. And personally, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge. I grew up in Seattle, but I'm not. Originally, I was a kind of a big Starbucks person, but then living in San Francisco, I was like, oh, Pete's, and then where's the local little shop? And so I kind of said Starbucks. I don't want to go to Starbucks anymore, but I'm going again because the digital app, and it's convenient, and you can order in advance. And if I'm driving somewhere, you can, and that's actually kind of nice. And that's a very much of those of you who have that, it's a good experience. Digital mobile first. So Dunkin' Donuts has been, a big business in the New England area for a long, long time, but they've been on an amazing growth streak. And they've expanded geographically, but they've adopted a digital mobile first. And they were really one of the first retailers really to aggressively get after a mobile and digital marketing strategy. So they do classic, TV outbound, radio, print, and so forth. They've been very, very aggressive in terms of doing lots of search engine optimization, search engine marketing, a tremendous amount of earned media. They've been very, very aggressive with Facebook, Instagram, and really creating much more of a community. And their marketing philosophy is like, they used to have a mobile or digital department, or I guess group. Now it's no, this is the center of what we do. And when they created their app in 2012, it was a very, very small thing. It soon very quickly became the centerpiece of their go-to-market strategy in terms of offers, launching new products. When you have the app, you get early awareness and insight into new products. Meet the baker behind this new donut. I guess some people are really into that. And the loyalty program they've launched with that, it's really been transformational for them. So John Costello, he was a guy who said, look, I'm a old marketing guy who didn't really understand digital. I had to really relearn that. So I think the other principle that's implied in this is that constantly learning and constantly evolving is critically important. So here's a company that was, relatively successful by many measures, but they really embraced digital marketing admittedly late, but they really got after it in a big way. They transitioned, the CMO and others really learned. So constantly learning and relearning, and being willing to raise your hand and say, John Costello, like, I don't understand digital marketing. He was a CMO. It's kind of a risky thing to say. Being the person in the room to say, I don't know, or could you help me understand that? And having a team encouraging, hiring people who are smarter than you, hiring people who really have different experiences, and bringing that to life has really been a cultural thing that Dunkin' Donuts has done that I think is reapplicable to really any business. It's an attitude of learning and reapplying things. But they've done a great job in mobile. LifeLock, I love this one. So I think I'm guessing most of you on the phone and so forth understand LifeLock. You're aware of LifeLock. It's a very interesting business. I want to tell you about the case and some principles that are come to life that I think are very applicable. In fact, I think this is maybe the most important case I'd suggest for our discussion today that perhaps might be reapplicable. So first, the LifeLock story. So founded in 2005, successful. You may remember they did lots of newspaper advertising, lots of print advertising. It grew pretty well. It had a pretty good value proposition, protecting your identity or getting it back if it's stolen and so forth. The CEO boldly said, I'm so confident in LifeLock's system. Here's my social security number. Do you guys remember that? I mean, he put his social security number in newspaper ads. It's kind of crazy. And it got lots of attention, but the problem is his identity was stolen like dozens of times. It was a problem. And somehow that leaked out. So this really bold statement was not good. So it didn't do much for the brand. Meanwhile, it's a big business. but they're saying, how, where's the next chapter of growth? And it wasn't happening. So here's LifeLock's growth trend, and it's hitting this. And meanwhile, their marketing costs are going like this. So their cost per new customer acquired was skyrocketing. Big problem. So, but it's a good business, right? At the time. Well, enter Tai Shea, and I already gave you an introduction on Tai Shea. I'm very proud of the work he did here. He went into LifeLock, I think, with appropriate humility, saying that you built something very special here, but there's more things we can do. And he overhauled the team. He certainly, kept a lot of the team, but brought in, best-in-class experts. And the most important thing is inserting a culture or philosophy of accountability. He really grounded the team in consumer research and big-time advanced analytics. So they used to have marketing analysis and marketing effectiveness in the finance group. He said, no, it's be accountable for our own results. And so he had a data team right in the marketing group, and they held themselves accountable. The other thing is that he didn't suggest that he was the expert or he was the master or he knew the brilliant marketing plan. He adopted an approach of hypotheses. So they had a bunch of different ideas, and they tried them, and they tested them, and they iterated, and some did well, some didn't do well. But because you have this market research on one side, you have this data analytics team on the other side, and then earned media, PR group, outbound media, you can try lots of things. And it was this hypothesis, test and learn, iterate, and optimize philosophy that really drove remarkable results here. So they've done things they still do some print. They do live read radio with liberal commentators, with conservative commentators. They didn't do a Super Bowl ad, but they bought out the pregame Super Bowl this year based on a lot of marketing testing they were doing. They're doing lots of marketing things, but the results are pretty remarkable. The LifeLock business since 2014 has actually doubled in revenue. The marketing budget absolutely has grown, but the cost per incremental customer acquired has gone down. Ty and the team, they instituted a really robust understanding of know your customer lifetime value. So this whole, they do creative marketing, but it's very driven data analytics. And so I think this is whether you're a B2B business, service business, consumer-oriented business, this obsession with the research, with data analytics, not suggesting paralysis by overanalysis at all, suggesting no, be actually more free, more willing to try new ideas, and you have the analytical capability to test, to learn, and adjust. And it's been very remarkable at LifeLock. And LifeLock happened to be acquired by Symantec this January for $2.3 billion. So that was a good result for the shareholders of LifeLock. And the marketing team at LifeLock is now the marketing team at Symantec. It's actually kind of cool. So good job by that group. Okay, Netflix. How are we doing on time? What time is it, Julie?
It's 9:40.
Okay. Okay. The next principle is about people. And I say you can't do world-class marketing, you can't build a world-class brand or world-class company without world-class people. So to the group assembled here, this is, again, perhaps stating the obvious, but I'd like to really reinforce it as something that is a core fundamental, to any business. And the Netflix case is fascinating. So I think rather, given the time and the fact that this Netflix case is actually broadly available, I'm going to encourage you guys to Google Netflix HR and learn about the Netflix orientation in terms of how they recruit, the environment that they create of ownership, accountability. They don't have tons of rules. They have principles, and they have this culture of shared ownership that is quite remarkable, and it's a really well-documented case. And so I think you reading it on your own would probably be more effective than me babbling a bit about it. But I do want to use this as an opportunity really to reinforce people, people, people. And again, I think it's Julie, as Julie and I were prepping yesterday, I met Julie for the first time. She says, I run communities. You run people. I mean, you really are all about creating a community so people can interact and people can learn at the firm and the portfolio companies. So you guys understand this, but it's a remarkable commitment. My point to everyone else is, okay, having that same commitment to people philosophy within each company is critically important. And it's not just an HR job, right? It's not just a CEO job. It's everyone being accountable for this idea, making each other better, and driving results. And I said something back, I don't remember over what slide, but the idea of, willingness to raise your hand and say, I don't know, or, hey, tell me, what do you think? Give me your point of view, and that dialogue that exists. Those are the kind of things that really make companies successful. Dialogue, collaboration, productive debate, and having people who have the expertise and are, great experiences, but also have the appropriate humility and, character, really kind of mix it up and understand to say, hey, you know what, you're right, I'm wrong. I'm learned something here and we can make this better. That's really critically important. So in my experience, again, I've had successes and failures. If the people piece isn't right, in terms of how the interaction's happening, the business piece won't be right either. So that's in the principles. And, I think I welcome any questions. I can elaborate as well, but I do want to, I'm trying to read the crowd here. I know when I gave this presentation, the first time, well, I'll tell you one person's reaction is like, well, I was expecting, more specifics, or, give me the answer. I want to know more of the answer. I know these things. And I actually appreciated that comment. And I guess the point is this, is that as I tried to suggest up front, that these are good principles to apply, but I think they're often forgotten. And, look, there may be 4 others, there may be 5 others, but it's my philosophy is focusing on the fundamentals, doing a few things really well, and reapplying these basic principles. That's where the magic happens. It's like, hey, you know what? We all know what we should be doing. We all know what the core principles are, but it's just the discipline and the willingness to say, I'm not sure if we're doing it as well as we could. I bet we could maybe do it better. And just having that focus on the fundamentals kind of discipline is, I guess, is my final thought. So I hope this was helpful.
May I see the microphone?
Sure.
Okay. I can just pass it over for
Okay.
a second. Can we all just thank John before we even get into questions? That was awesome. Thank you. Just for everybody out there on Zoom, just a reminder that if you want to ask a question, click on Q&A at the top left-hand corner of your screen and type in your question. Or if you want to ask it live, click raise your hand, and then we will turn it over to you via Zoom, and you can actually speak to us. So please engage. We're lucky to have John here for another 15 minutes or so. So let's hear any questions from the audience. Well, I have a question if no one wants to go. So maybe since I'm right here. So my question for John is, oftentimes we can learn from from the mistakes that we make. And so I'm wondering, are there any times when you did not follow one of these principles where you really learned from that and it stretched you as a leader?
There's a lot. Let's see. I'll talk about pets.com and just the principle. And so pets.com was 1999, and maybe one of the businesses was kind of the epitome of the dot-com mania. And I've been at P&G for 12 years, and a lot of the whole interview process was very strange. And it was very much driven by, hey, this is the new economy. Things are different. It's all about eyeballs. I'm like, wow, okay, I need to unlearn all this stuff I learned at P&G. Apparently it's different, right? This new economy. And of course, lots of businesses had been built and crazy valuations. It was nutty. We probably remember this, or you've read about it. And I think, getting sucked up in that, we did a lot of the principles of pets.com well. Consumer understanding in terms of core positioning. The sock puppet was successful by many measures, but having the rigor to analyze your own stuff and being self-critical kind of escaped us and escaped the whole team. And it was really disappointing. And it was kind of a wake-up call. Saying, hold on a second. It was going well, and that we had lots of visits. We had lots of revenue at pets.com. And I think there was a 6-month period where we were really smart, and then we were very quickly very stupid. But I think it was just a lack of reapplying the data analytics and understanding the cost per acquisition. And I'm not trying to let myself off the hook to saying the culture said, oh, eyeballs, don't worry about profitability. But the business was gross margin negative, meaning for every I mean, that's crazy. For every bag of dog food or kitty litter or treat you would ship, you know, you're losing money. So I'm not even talking about profitability, like gross margin negative, not good. And not having the willingness to say and to state the unpopular thing, like I knew that was a problem, but to say, you know what, I not be jerky about it, but you know, this is a problem. So we're gross margin negative. Let's think about rationalizing our spending, or how can we think about pricing in a way that would be, you know, more rational with this. And you know, it's very strange that the U.S. Post Office and UPS and FedEx, they're camping out in our lobby. So we must be a really profitable customer to them. That's a problem. How can we think about renegotiating that? So, you know, not being swept up in a flood and being willing, having the courage to say, hold on, let's apply discipline of measuring our results and raise our hand and be willing to state the unpopular thing, which is maybe we should focus more on profitability early on. Something I'd say. Yep.
Okay, so our question is, will this presentation be available for download? I would like to have it as a tool as we look at our marketing strategy. Yes, this will be recorded and it will be available online on Basecamp. Thank you. Does anyone else have questions for John?
You mentioned how important it was to really understand your consumers. Was there a time that you had a strategy for your companies, then you met with the consumers and realized that your approach is wrong, you're off, and you're surprised about it?
Oh, that's a great question. So the question was there a time where you mentioned that I talked about consumer understanding, and was there a time where we really engaged with the consumer and realized that something was wrong, we made an adjustment? Is that fair? Okay. Tell me if it's not, because I sometimes don't summarize well. That was the gist. Okay, good, thanks. Let's see. Well, let's talk about Clorox, because that's a, you know, everyone knows about Clorox bleach. So I joined Clorox, and I was running a division, which was the laundry division, which is bleach. And I think they thought, okay, I don't know about this guy. He's kind of a dot-com startup guy. Hotwire was successful, but let's have him run something that he can't break. So we'll put him on bleach. And it was interesting. It's such the Clorox has lots of brands, STP, Hidden Valley Ranch, Burt's Bees. It's really diverse, but it's known for bleach, right? And everyone in that company has been a part of the bleach business. So there are clear, not principle, rules, like must be priced at 99 cents. You know, this is how you do it. This is the bottle. And so I said, okay, sounds right. So we started talking to consumers, and it was a real wake-up call, because people were, maybe it shouldn't have been a wake-up call, but it was. People were horrified about bleach in terms of it felt toxic, and there hadn't been a lot of work done on reinforcing what it is, and when I spill it, it could stain my clothes, and lots of concerns around that. And we basically, through lots of consumer engagement, and it was some quantitative stuff, but ultimately it was, you know, we were not doing in-home visits, which are not that expensive to do. Talking about bleach, we discovered a notion that you really need to re-educate people about what is bleach and how to apply it. And so one of the things we said, well, we need to fix the application. So from these home visits came the bleach pen. So, and I used to live in Japan for a long time. So the team said, let's go look at Japanese writing instruments. Well, it's a long story. I won't make it that long. But how could you apply bleach in a way that's safer and eliminates the risk for, you know, on the spot stain removal? Let's put it in a pen that's controllable with a little scrubby tip. The other thing we determined is that the hardcore people who really understood bleach in the South, east of the US, understood that bleach best disinfecting agents. So it kills germs, kills pathogens, kills food spoilage organisms. And we weren't doing anything with health and wellness. And these in-home visits in the South determined, hey, we need to go back. And in the 1950s, the Pasteur Institute actually said that bleach, sodium hypochlorite, was one of the most important medical breakthroughs of the 19th century, because it eradicated cholera, waterborne illness. And so we got back to this through these insights, a focus on disinfection. And then tons of work was done at Clorox in terms of Clorox disinfecting wipes, clean and disinfect, kill pathogens. And it wasn't just me, it was a team of people, but I think it came from questioning the status quo and going out to engage consumers, and we find these powerful consumers knew much more about bleach than maybe folks at the company did, which was really interesting. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you.
You might have sort of answered my question with that last example, but you had a point about discovering unarticulated customer needs.
Mm.
And I think that's when we struggle. We send a lot of surveys, but what we get back is what people can tell us and,
Yep.
and articulate to us. How do you think about best practices for getting to those unarticulated needs?
Yes, that's really hard. So,
Repeat the question.
oh yes, thank you. So the question was unarticulated consumer needs. What research techniques or what have I done to help mine and get at those unarticulated consumer needs? Because many of us, it's easy to get clear needs, but mining these unarticulated needs that define things is very difficult. So, we brought up Steve Jobs today, and, he had a philosophy that, oh, market research is stupid and you shouldn't do market research. And, we just have to have really smart people who can see into the future. And, consumer will never tell you what you need. And I don't agree with that answer, but there's some truth there, which is that traditional research techniques will indeed not get you the future. It will not help you mine the unarticulated needs. So, what I found is that it's a lot of prototyping, fast cycle iteration, A/B testing, and putting things in front of consumers that are unexpected and are crazy ideas. So I talked today about having, a group and creating hypotheses and trying new things. So I'm trying to think about, well, your own business well, so I won't try and create an example for you. But for me, it was a product trying a bunch of different product prototypes. At Hotwire, it was thinking about the different products to do and how to present those in a way. So we'd say, well, I'm not sure. Let's try these various things. What will really get to the bargain discount travel in a new way? So I would say prototyping, lots of interaction, lots of needs. Now, let me say, actually, one thing popped in my head. I'm just going to keep going because the best company at this, I should have remembered this in my first answer, I'm sorry, is, do you guys remember Orange Glow and OxyClean? Okay, this is an amazing company. And now, of course, Billy Mays, and now this company is owned by Arm & Hammer, Church & Dwight. But this was founded by the Apple family from Colorado. And there was literally dad, mom, 4 sons, 2 daughters, and they built this amazing OxyClean business that I think sold for almost $2 billion about 10 years ago. What they did to get at this was that they went to carnivals, so literally like the state fair in Colorado, and they bought a booth. And dad was a really wild inventor, and he would create these products, and they would also create different ways to sell them. He would create demos, and basically I call it the carnival barker style, where he would sit there and hawk these products and talk about, hey, OxyClean, da da da, and he'd have a different spiel, and he would literally try systematically different headlines, different demos, and different approaches, and it was brilliant. And I'm not saying we all go to the California State Fair or whatever, but what were the underlying principles there? Prototyping, A/B testing, lots of consumer interaction. And when I met with him, because Clorox, we were looking at buying that company, he was serious. It's all about iteration. It's a light bulb went off, like, oh my gosh, this guy has never been trained in market research, but he understands the value of consumer interaction and prototyping. He was getting a lot of unarticulated needs through constant interaction. And based on the size of the crowd around him, he would determine whether or not this was a good idea or not. And if it wasn't gathering a crowd. So that story led to some more of the informal research that I'm recommending. I mentioned in Graham's question about just going out to the airports or going out to engage your consumers in unexpected ways with lots of interactions. And unfortunately, there's not like a perfect answer. And maybe someone else in the audience has a better answer. But the idea of getting at unarticulated consumer needs, I don't think it's a silver bullet, but constant engagement, iteration, and make it informal. Like find a way for Ingenio, how could you actually engage consumers on a more regular, informal basis? Maybe it's a power user group that you bring in, you buy them lunch, once a month. You respect them because they're big customers. You want to talk to them about the business. And then maybe you bring in skeptics and you talk to them. What's I'm sorry, I don't know your business. I'm just trying to suggest this constant engagement.
More of a specific question on measurement. So you
Good.
mentioned part of the LifeLock example,
Right.
getting crystal clear on LTV and all those important metrics. Any just tactical recommendations you can make on whether tool or applications used, maybe in either the LifeLock example or some of the other experiences?
Yes.
The reason I ask is we have a homegrown customer database.
Right.
And we have a lot of web analytics.
Right.
And then there's the marketing spend, and it gets kind of hodgepodge and truly getting it all integrated. So just curious to know from your experience if there's like a comprehensive tool that you've done as well.
Good. That's so the question was about data analytics, and have I discovered specific tools to help companies do analytics well, web metrics, etc. Right? And I'm going to say, first of all, it's an important question. There's not one tool, right? But it's first of all I think my philosophy is having this accountability, and a data analytics team within marketing is really important, or it could be, depending upon the company, it could be within sales to measure the effectiveness of our efforts to acquire customers. Really important. Next, having the figuring out your customer lifetime value. There's an art and science to that. So you can figure out, well, the typical customer might buy this many times, and how much does it cost to buy my product or service? But there's lots of art that goes into that as well to understand that and to be honest about that. So having a group to work through that. But then this is a question I had to, so for me, I'm a marketer. Most of my experience was, a lot of it was pre-internet, and then I was involved in hotwire. We did lots of leading stuff. So for the last couple of years, I've been doing non-marketing things. So I've been leading a life sciences company, and so I literally in December I said, I love marketing. I love thinking about that, and I'm getting behind. So I've kind of re-educated myself by talking to lots of people. But there are a number of blogs and online tools, and so my answer is, rather than me trying to answer right now, because there's not a tool, I actually think maybe I could work up an email and share it with Julia to suggest, here's 2 blogs that are really critical. I think there's one blog that's phenomenal in terms of really understanding data metrics, and it's like a weekly update. There's a great one about inbound marketing as well. So thinking about unlocking the essence of SEO, SEM, earned media, right? And doing that. And there's a community out there. And so maybe I might offer a number of links, blogs that might help you track this down. And that's a journey that I've been, I started taking, and I'm still taking it, because I guess back to that point about constantly learning. I mean, things are changing so fast in social media that I've really had to do lots of catching up. It's been fun, but so I think I'll try and do that early next week, maybe.
That's great.
Yeah.
So we actually need to wrap.
Okay.
But let's all give John another round of applause.
Right. Thank you.
And if I might just say a couple words
Sure.
to wrap. So thank you again so much, John, for joining us. And thank you for everyone who's out there on Zoom. This will be recorded, and we will make it available on Basecamp. And also, just so everybody knows, the presentation that John gave today is actually an accelerator on Basecamp. So you have access to a collection of best practices, and this is posted on Basecamp. So if you go to Basecamp and you look up accelerators under the playbook, you'll find this presentation. So thank you again for taking the time, John. And he just offered to make available an email with some recommendations for resources for us and our community. So we'll get that, and we'll circulate that. And thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Okay.